In this video, I'll show you the two examples in Chapter 1. They are the guide plate design and the spacer design. Both of these drawings are in inches, and the purpose of these examples is to show different ways of entering coordinates. So when we draw these lines that make up this model, we could use absolute coordinates, relative rectangular coordinates, just interactively snapping to the grid to click on points, relative polar coordinates, maybe a direct distance entry method, and we'll also use different methods of creating circles. So let's start with the guide plate. So this is in inches, so I'm going to start an inch template, and for my first point I'll start at the origin. So let's click on the line command and type 0, 0 for the origin, and then the next point is also an absolute coordinate of 5.5, comma 0. So that gives me a horizontal line 5.5 units long, and the line command remains active. I can't see my line, so what I'm going to do is pan the model. To do that, I can go to the View menu, Pan, and I have different choices. I'm going to choose Real Time. You can see the cursor moves to a hand, so I can sort of just left-click the mouse and grab the drawing area and just move it the way that I want it. So now I can see my line on the screen, that first line that I drew. If I hit Escape on the keyboard to get out of the pan command, notice how it puts me right back in the line tool. So I can continue drawing my lines. The next point for this, the next point is going to be a relative rectangular value. So I want a vertical line that's 2.5 units, 2.5 inches long. So in relative coordinates, we use the @ symbol. So on the command line, I'm going to type @ which just means from the last point, the coordinate is going to be 0, 2.5. Because from the last point, we're not moving in the x direction. We're just going up 2.5. Hit enter. Okay. Now notice as I'm drawing this line, notice my coordinate display. If I click on that, I can change it to Cartesian, in other words, rectangular. So right now my cursor is at 6.8, 3.15. Or I can toggle that to polar, which would be the length of the line and then the angle. So right there, that's a 1.47 inch long line at an angle of 0. Here we got about 1.43 at an angle of 37 degrees. So that's the polar way of specifying coordinate. And this is just a coordinate display if I want to display it rectangular or polar. I can still type it however I'd like. So let's try the next point just by snapping. So it's an interactive method. So we need a line that's horizontal and 2.5 units long to the right. So I'm just going to toggle on my grid display, my snap mode. So you can see how it's snapping to the grid now. And notice on the coordinate display on the status bar, the x and y values jump to half-inch increments because my grid is set up for half-inch spacing. And my model works out to be multiples of a half an inch. So I can just go over 2.5 and just click with the mouse. So that's another way of specifying a point, just by clicking. But I need that snap and the grid, I need the snap to the grid on so that I get an exact point. So now that I created that line, I'm just going to turn off the snap. And then for the next point, we're going to do relative polar. So this is going to be a vertical line that's 3 inches long. So in polar coordinates, we need the length and the angle. So I'm going to say at 3 angle symbol 90. So that just means from the last point it's going 3 inches at an angle of 90 degrees. So that gives me that vertical line. Next we'll do a relative rectangular. So same thing, from the last point we want to go to the left 1.5 inches and up 1 inch. So to do that I use the at symbol, negative 1.5 comma 1. Okay. So we did absolute, relative, rectangular. This line was snap to grid, interactive. This line was relative polar. This slant diagonal line was relative rectangular. Next we're going to do a direct distance entry. So to do that I just kind of hover over the endpoint and then drag the mouse to the left without clicking. So that gives me that green dotted line, and basically it's kind of like a snap where it's gonna the distance I enter is gonna be on that line, that imaginary line. So we want 6.5 inches. The nice thing about direct distance entry is that I don't have to specify positive or negative. You can see in the graphics window I've already set the direction by dragging the mouse to the left. So now I just type in my value. So it's going to be positive 6.5. Hit enter. And that gives me a 6.5 inch line. Now, if you're making a closed loop, a quick way to close it is to right click and just say close. And that's going to connect the last endpoint with the first endpoint that you drew. So there's my overall shape. All right. Now remember, for this example I have dynamic input turned off. We've talked about it a bit, but we'll really go into more detail in chapter 3. So everything, you have to look at the command line. When you have dynamic input turned on, then you'll see on the screen a polar preview of the line. You can still type rectangular coordinates, but it'll default to this polar preview. And I'm just going to escape out of that, turn dynamic input off. So if you're having trouble, just turn dynamic input off until we talk more about it. Okay, next thing, we just need a couple circles. So up on the draw ribbon panel, if I drop down the circle command, I've got some different choices for how I'm going to specify that circle. So we want center diameter. And the first point, the center point, is going to be a absolute value of 2.5 comma 3. The diameter is going to be 2.5. Okay. So that's an absolute coordinate, or in our case a world coordinate, because our user coordinate system is aligned with the world coordinate system. The world coordinate system is just the origin that AutoCAD gives us, which is what we're using as our coordinate system. So absolute in our case is the same as the world coordinate. To draw the second circle, I can just right click and say repeat circle. And I want to specify the center by using relative rectangular. So from the last point, which is the center of that circle we drew, from the center of the last circle, I'm going to say at, and then it's going to be 2.5, 2. comma 2. So from the last circle, 2.5 to the right, 2 up. And then be careful here, because notice that it's asking for the radius. On the command prompt it says specify radius of circle. But I want to put it in as the diameter, because that's the number I'm given, is 1.5 diameter. So you just have to be careful, because even though the first circle we drew, we clicked a diameter circle, by default AutoCAD uses radius. So even though we repeated the circle, it's asking for radius, but we can change that. So one way to do that is just to right click and then select diameter. And now you can see on the command prompt it says specify diameter. So that's going to be 1.5, enter. Okay, so all the geometry is drawn. Now we're ready to start dimensioning it. Before we do that, I'm going to set the dimension layer to be the current layer. This way, anything I draw from now on will go to that layer, and it'll take on the properties of that layer. For instance, it'll be red in color. I'm also noticing in the PDF we have 1 decimal place. So if we go over to the annotation panel here, I have a few different dimension styles set up in this template. And we're going to choose the dimension style that has just 1 decimal place. It's called dim01. Okay, so then I just click dimension command and then start dimensioning. Doesn't matter the order that you do it. So for some things, you can just click on the line itself, and that'll give you the length of that line. Okay, so I'll do that for this line also. But for the bottom, I want the overall dimension. So in that case, I'm going to go from the endpoint, make sure I get that snap to endpoint, and then snap to that endpoint, and then move the mouse until the preview looks in the correct orientation that I want, and then click again to place it. The circles, you can just click on the circle itself, and that'll give you the diameter. And the nice thing about that, with our dimension style, it puts a center mark there. So when I do the dimension to the location of the circles, I lost my tool, okay. I can snap to the center mark. And what's nice about that is it gives me an offset from the center mark. It just makes it look a little nicer, but it's not part of the grade or anything. Okay. Next thing you do is just space things out, maybe try to save some space, bring things a little closer, and just make it look nice. Something like this, if you want to be really particular, again, this part's not graded, you can select a dimension, and when you click this grip, to move it, you can actually snap it to another dimension, and it'll align it to that dimension. See, I missed a dimension over here. Here, there. And we can do that same trick. Bring this a little closer. Bring these closer. Okay. You can see this dimension is actually overlapping the object. So I'm going to pull that grip back to the endpoint, and then it'll give me the offset. Just make it look a little nicer. But that part's not critical for your grade, just more about practicing, making sure you can draw it and it's presentable. So the model space part of it is done. We'll switch over to the layout tab. It's called A size here because we have an A size sheet of paper set up in our template, which is 8.5 by 11 in landscape mode. And you can see here, it's already centered on the sheet. If yours is not, what you can do is switch this button over here, which you don't see in model space. But when you're on a layout tab, you get this model, and then if you click it, it toggles between model and paper. So what that means is we're in the model space from the paper space, from the sheet. So I can now move my model around within the sheet. A good indicator that you're in the model from the sheet is that you can see the view cube, the navigation bar, the UCS. So what you can do, you can also set the zoom factor. And another button you see on the status bar that you don't see on the model tab is the scale. So this is the scale of our view. And for now, we can just choose scale to fit. And that'll just bring it within the view port here. So once it looks good, we can just toggle this back to paper. So it says paper there. It just looks like the paper. We don't see any view cube. And then we can start filling out the title block. So I already filled this out. Instead of the week, I just changed this to the example or exercise number. So in this case, example chapter 1, example 1A. So exam 0101A. The date, you can use any format you'd like, month first, day first. You put the day you created it or the date it's due, it doesn't matter. For scale, I just put not to scale. Sometimes you'll see it abbreviated NTS, but it just shows us that this drawing is not going to be printed out true size. In the future, we'll get into setting an actual scale. All right, so you want to save that. I save it as example 0101A.dwg. And then once that's saved, you want to export it to a PDF because that's what you'll submit for a grade. So you go to the application menu, export, and then choose PDF. And just save it with the same file name as a PDF file. And then we can go ahead and open that up and see if it turned out. Oh, I should put it in this folder. It came out pretty well. The bottom of the border of the title block is missing. So we can see it's probably just a little outside the margin. But don't worry about that. Just as long as the full model is on the sheet in the PDF, that's good enough. And I'll update these templates and send you some new templates. The next and final example in chapter 1 is the spacer design, and it's also in inches, so I can just start a new drawing using the inch template. If I just hit the little plus icon next to the drawing tab, it'll base a drawing off the last template I used. I'll go ahead and save it right away, and we'll call it exam0101b.dwg. Okay, that updates the name on the drawing tab. And I'm ready to start drawing. For this, we're also going to use some different input methods for the coordinates. I'm going to start by doing a snap to the grid. So I've got the grid turned on already. I'm going to turn on the snap mode. And we're going to start a line. And instead of starting at 0, 0, the origin like we did last time, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick a point because you don't have to start at the origin. So because we're on the grid, I can just pick a point anywhere near the origin is fine. And then we're going to enter a relative rectangular coordinate of 6, 0. So this is going to be at 6, 0. That just gives us a horizontal line that's 6 inches long. The next point is going to be relative polar. So we're going to do at 3, angle 90. Now let's try something different. We'll do a direct distance entry. So it's going to go to the left 2 units. And we'll do the same thing, down 1.5. Oh, sorry. Let me start that over. It's down 0.5. Could have also snapped to the grid, either way. We're going to go over 2, up 0.5, and then over 2. 2. Now the grid is half a unit, so I could just click there if I wanted to. For this one, I'll just do direct distance of 2. Now when you're done drawing lines, you can just right-click and choose Enter. That'll end whatever command you're in. Okay. Now, we want 2 arcs at each end, so that's why I don't have to draw a line here. Now, I don't really need this line, so I'm going to erase it. So in the Modify menu panel, click the little eraser icon, and just click on that line. And then I can just right-click or hit Enter. It'll disappear. So now I can draw an arc. The arc has to be centered in the middle of these 2 lines, and then it has to be tangent to the top and bottom line. So I go up to the Draw panel, and there's different ways to create an arc. So we're going to choose Center, Start, End. So there are the 3, you need 3 points to draw an arc, and that's the order we're going to choose this in. So since I have the snap on, I have a point right in the middle, so I can start my center there. And arcs are drawn in the counterclockwise direction, so we're going to want to start at the bottom for the second point, and then click the top point. And we'll do the same method on the other side. I'm going to right-click, repeat the arc, snap to my center point on the grid. This time I'm going to choose the upper point for the start point of the arc because we're going counterclockwise. So it kind of draws it out counterclockwise. I think I know what happened. When I did repeat arc, it didn't do the same type of arc. It defaulted to the general arc. So what we're going to do is center, start, end. So we do my center, that's my start, and that's the end. So you can always look at the command prompt to make sure you're specifying the values that it's asking for. All right, so next thing we need are a couple circles at the centers of these arcs, and they're going to be 1.25 diameter. So it's going to do a circle with diameter, and we'll just snap to the center point. Specified diameter of 1.25. Same thing over here. 1.25. Okay, we're almost ready for the dimensions. In this example, unlike the first example, I'm going to put some center marks. So to do that, we can go to the Annotate tab of the ribbon, and then just choose Center Mark. Then we can click each circle. But before I do that, let's go to the Layer menu, and we actually have a layer for center lines. So if I make that active, then it'll put the center lines on that layer. So you can see sometimes it's hard to click the circle when you have the snap turned on. It looks like I might get it there, but let's turn off snap. And I can do all of this with the command still running, and then click the circle. Then just right click enter, or just click escape to get out of the command. Now we want to do dimensions, so I'll set my dimension layer current, and then just click dimension and start clicking away. So we want a 1/2 inch dimension here. Oh, and by the way, I'm using 2 decimal places. So we've got the dim 02 active. I can try to adjust this text a bit. Put it like that. And continue. So I'll grab the endpoints of my center marks. I think it looks a little nicer. We'll do diameter. We'll do 2 units. And I can snap to that other dimension to align it. I need a radius of this arc. And see how intelligent AutoCAD is. If you select an arc for a dimension, it gives it the radius. If you select a circle, it puts it as diameter. And that's just standard practice. If you really wanted to dimension a different way, you could. But it assumes that's what you want, and that is what I want in this case. So it looks like we could also maybe put a center line. Or just, yeah, we can drag this longer. Just connect that. And, you know, drag this out. So you see there's an arrow there. So we just drag that out. Maybe just, you know, make it look nice. Extend it beyond the model. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Let's see if I'm missing anything. Maybe just make this a little closer. Alright, so now we're ready to lay it out on the sheet. I'm going to switch over to the A-size tab, and then I'm just going to click the button for model and paper. Switch that to model space. You see the status bar updates. And then I can do the scale to fit. Now I'll just bring it into the view, and we'll just toggle back to the paper. Another way to do that is just double click outside of the sheet. And then once that looks good, fill out the title block. So here's where I'm going to do exam 0101B. I'm going to say not to scale. And it's going to be, I'm going to do month, day, year. We'll do it the due date, 20. Let's do a zoom. There we go. So we're going to save that. So save it as a DWG and then export it from the application menu to a PDF. I'll save that in my drawing folder, same name. There we go. Open that up. looks pretty good. Like I said, like the first example, the bottom of the title block got cut off, but I'll fix that and send you new templates. But you don't have to worry about that for now. All right, and that's it for the examples in chapter 1.